So really cool. For East vs. West 6, you can get these trading cards that are signed by all the athletes. And what's interesting is that they have stats on them. So we're going to go through them, see if these stats make sense, see if anything jumps out as totally incorrect. So yeah, let's get into it. Naturally, we're going to start with John Brzenk, the undisputed greatest of all time in arm wrestling. We'll start with the body stats, then get into the arm wrestling stats. So he's 58 years old, 6'1", 230 pounds, 17.5 inch biceps, and a 16-inch forearm. And obviously, basically all of these are subject to change depending on what match he has coming up, or just whether he feels like bulking or cutting. Getting into the arm wrestling stats, they have him at a 9 for inside power, meaning hooking and pressing, which is fair. John himself has said that he's becoming more of an outside top rolling arm wrestler with age. So it has his outside game at a 9.5, which I think is fair. That's definitely his bread and butter right now. Although we did see him do an amazing job inside against Corey West at the Monster Factory. Moving on, we have side pressure at a 9.5, shoulder pressure at a 9.5. I assume that means just pressing in general, which yeah, we've seen John press to finish quite a few times. Table IQ 10. I hate giving out 10s. I don't think anyone should ever get a 10. The implication there is that you couldn't possibly improve anymore. So while I will never knock the table IQ of John Brzenk, and again, if you hear this, 9.9 should be the limit. Okay, so his wrist is listed as a 9, his experience a 10. Again, there's that 10. Because he's going to be more experienced immediately after this event. So again, I don't like the 10 thing. Hand control is a 10, and I have an issue with that, but for a different reason. You have his wrist as a 9, as in his wrist flexion is a 9, but his hand control is a 10. Wrist flexion is a big part of controlling your opponent's hand, so I don't see how one can be a 9 and the other a 10. But hey, we're just picking these apart for fun, so let's move on. We have endurance at a 9 and explosiveness an 8, and John has talked about this. He was way more explosive when he was younger. He said that his strength is comparable to his younger self, but he doesn't have that speed and explosiveness anymore. So yeah, I think an 8 is fair there. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I put out a bunch of content for you guys, and that's a great way to support me. Next up, we're looking at Jerry Big Daddy Cadorette, 49 years old, 6 feet tall, 324 pounds, 21.6 inch biceps, and a 20 inch forearm. They have his inside game listed as a 9, which, I mean, pressing is basically as inside as you can get. So they can go 9.5, so I don't know why that's not a 9.5. Who can press as strong as Jerry Cadorette? A very small club, so I think they're doing him a little dirty there, but what are you going to do? His outside game is listed as a 7, which I guess in the scheme of the elite super heavyweights, that's fair, but trust me, as someone who has trained with Jerry, his top roll is actually nasty. He's just that much stronger inside. Okay, interestingly, they have his side pressure as a 10 and shoulder pressure as a 10, and I guess if you count those as his press, sure, but pressing is also definitely an inside technique. Again, it's as inside as you can get. So I guess the issue here is just how they divvy up the names for these stats. For future ones, they should just rename inside for hook. I think that's what they're going for. But anyway, his table IQ is listed as a 9.5. His wrist is listed as a 7, which Jerry does end up in the flop wrist a lot, and it's not that his wrist isn't so strong, it's just he doesn't want to fight in that battleground. He'd rather just keep moving towards the pin pad. His experience is a 10, that's absolutely fair. He's been pulling for an unbelievably long time. Very impressive. His hand control is a 7, his endurance is a 10, which, yeah, we've seen him, especially against Michael Todd, in I think like an 11-minute match back in WAL. Absolutely absurd. And his explosiveness is a 9.5, which, yeah, I agree with that. Even though he's massive, he coils himself up at the start and then just flings forward on the go. It's nutty. All right, next up we have Michael Todd, 49 years old, 6'3", 231 pounds, 20.5 inch biceps, 16.9 inch forearms. For arm wrestling stats, again, they have his inside game at an 8.5, even though he has a nasty press, but they have that shoulder pressure stat as well, so we'll look past that. Outside game is a 9.5, fair. His king's move is really the best in the business. Side pressure 8.5, shoulder pressure 9.5, table IQ 9, which yeah, I think that's reasonable because he tends to get in extremely long matches, so just by the nature of being in an arm wrestling match for so long, he's going to get very familiar and comfortable with every kind of situation you could find yourself in. Wrist, they have him at an 8.5, and again, this is an issue with the name of these stats. If we're talking about wrist flexion, that's one thing, but if we're talking about radial deviation or rise, I mean, Michael Todd has to have a 9 or a 9.5. He trains the crap out of that. In fact, he did a whole video just talking about training the riser and how important it is. Hand control, they have him at an 8. Endurance, 9.5, fair. Explosiveness, 9.5, also fair. Next up, we're looking at Irakli Zirakashvili. 25 years old, 6'3", 231 pounds, 18.1-inch biceps, 16.9-inch forearms. For arm wrestling stats, they have his inside game at an 8, which that's fair. He's not known as an inside puller. His outside game is a 9.5, and yes, that is his bread and butter. His side pressure is an 8, shoulder pressure 7.5, table IQ 8.5, which I think they're probably saying that because he's sort of a silver bullet kind of arm wrestler. He has his move and he goes to it every time, and it's your job to figure out how to stop it. Wrist, they have him at a 9, which even though he's a top roller, especially with that defensive top roll style, wrist flexion is a very important part of it. He has 7.5 for experience, which he's 25 years old, so you know, what can you really expect there? Hand control, they have him at an 8.5, which seems a little bit low considering how strong his wrist is, and you combine that with a ton of back pressure into the opponent's fingers. I'd say he has very good control of his opponent's hands in most scenarios. Endurance, he's an 8, which I mean, most of his matches are usually over like that, as you saw in the last clip. Then for explosiveness, they give him a 9. Maybe it should even be a 9.5. He's young, he's fast, he's strong, and like I said, his matches tend to go fast. Although note that against people like Todd Hutchings here or even Sasha Andreev, if Irakli gets caught, I mean, he tends to lose to a very strong inside puller. But again, he's 25 years old. He's got a ton of time to improve, and he will, because he's from the country of Georgia, same as Levon, same as Gennady, so they got things figured out pretty well there, and keep an eye on this young stud. He's going to be a problem. We have a bunch more to go through here, but this video is already getting too long, so I'm going to have to break it up into different segments. I think it's really cool what they're doing here, but let me know in the comments, did any of these jump out to you as totally off base? If you want to check out some of the arm wrestling equipment that I make myself, I'll leave a link to this in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you think I earned it, subscribe. I put out multiple new videos every week, including the remaining segments of this video series, and I will see you in the next one.